we have one here with us today, and Carla, Kayla Van Dyke. Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I apologize, I was not able to be here for the testimony of each of you. I've had an opportunity to look through through your written comments, but I was meeting with a small group of Alaskans that is involved with a science and engineering program designed specifically for Alaska Natives, and it's one that I can get very, very excited about because we're going into small villages where oftentimes the educational opportunities may be limited because it's difficult to recruit teachers out in those areas, certainly to retain them. We're not able to offer a full complement of the sciences in physics and higher calculus. And what this program is demonstrating is that when the expectations are set high, when you know that as a junior in high school, you can take apart and rebuild a computer and make things work and figure it out on your own, all of a sudden the world opens up to you. And it's just a reminder to me about the expectations that we have for our students, whether it's those with limited English proficiency, whether it's those with disabilities, whether it's those that have a home life, as has been described here, that is exceptionally challenging. But again, it comes back to the expectations that we have of our young people. Mr. Hinojosa, I want to ask you about the flexibility that we have to assess students in their native languages. I am a big proponent of language in the schools, immersion languages in the schools. My kids were beneficiaries in the public schools in Anchorage of that. I've been working to encourage, particularly in our rural communities, that our students have access to their native cultural languages, be instructed in that. We're seeing a real demonstration of school is now much more relevant to our kids, but we're in a situation where you're not able then to assess in the native language necessarily because either you don't have enough speakers of the language or it doesn't lend itself to the formal assessments, and that's what we're finding with UPIC instruction, for instance. What's your recommendation for assessing student academic proficiency when the assessment is not in the child's first language? How do we deal with this?
Senator, that is certainly a huge challenge. We're very fortunate in Dallas that 96% of the students that we have, Spanish is the language, but we get refugees from Afghanistan, the Congo, Somalia, and we have that similar difficulty as you would describe in Alaska, because it is a very critical point. Because if you cannot determine the students' proficiency in their native language, then it's very difficult to prescribe what needs to happen next. And so that is a critical point. We seek volunteers. We have a lot of community agencies that do help us out whenever we don't have staff to help us determine that. But that is a critical point that local resources have to come in and help, because we really believe that if you can get proficient in your native language, it's much easier than to transfer and become literate and proficient in a second language. And many of the students that we get students in high school that have never held a pencil, they've never worn shoes, and they come from the Congo, and we have a huge challenge to get them prepared to be successful academically. I don't have a silver bullet answer for you, but we know that it's a smaller issue for us, since only 4% of our students fall into those kind of categories. But I can just imagine, but it is an issue to be focused on, because it is critical that we understand that is a big part of what has to get accomplished.
Well, and I think we recognize, whether it's Alaska Natives or we see with our American Indians, when we can incorporate the native culture into the education, I think we're seeing a resurgence in interest in what's going on in the classroom, again, the relevance. But if we can do more with incorporating the language, I think that helps us. But we struggle with then how you deal with the assessment. I want to ask you just one more quick question here, and this also relates to how we deal with the testing. You've recommended that we codify the current regulation that the LAP students not be required to be tested in their first year here in the United States. And I don't have any problem with that, certainly. But we've got an interesting situation going on in Alaska. You might not think about it, but we have a pretty significant Hmong population in Anchorage. So what has happened is they have come to California. That's been where they have come into the United States. They have been provided instruction in Hmong there in California. Then they come to Alaska. They've got no English proficiency, but they're not eligible for this exception because they've been in the country now for in excess of a year. And so we struggle. What do we do at this point in time?
Yeah.
Got any answers?
That's a difficult challenge, but because we do want to be held accountable. One of the best things about the previous law is that now we're held accountable for all student groups. And yet, there needs to be some reasonableness in the law.
Got to have some flexibility.
Some
there,
flexibility for situations like that occur. And certainly, I don't know how to draft a bill, but that would be something that would be important to consider in a kind of situation that you described. Because now they're in their second year,
Right.
and now the stakes get very high.
Right. Well, if any of you have any suggestions that you would like to provide to us as we work on this, we'd certainly be appreciative. Thank you all.
Thank you, Senator Murkowski. Senator Bennett.